For a firearm design to be considered successful, it must excel in a handful of key areas. It must be reliable, durable, effective, and for military firearms, also boast a lengthy service history in which its adoption increased the combat effectiveness to whomever it was issued to. Many firearms over the last century can fit this criteria: the M16, the AK-47, and even the Mosin Nagant. But precious few firearm designs can compare to the nearly legendary 20th century pistol that is the M1911. Forged in the earliest days of what would become one of the world's greatest military superpowers, the M1911's genesis, much like the great innovators of the late 19th century, came about from great struggle and the need for a complete paradigm shift in what was currently available. And although its inventor is known for many successful designs, the M1911 pistol design of John Moses Browning caused this one man to become almost deified as a firearms designer and inventor, and to become an inspiration for generations of gun designers long after his death. The story of the M1911 begins around the dawn of the 20th century, when the United States was at war with the First Republic of the Philippines. This was a rapidly evolving period for small arms design, as militaries around the world were just beginning to become more industrialized and mechanized, and black powder cartridges were being exchanged for smokeless designs that could propel bullets at even higher velocities than ever. At the same time, firearms designs were becoming more complex, with self-loading and magazine-fed rifles, pistols, and shotguns becoming increasingly popular and available. Despite these new advances, militaries around the world have struggled with a phenomenon known as fighting the last war for centuries, meaning that armies usually start new conflicts using yesterday's technologies. This was certainly the case for the Filipino-American War, as US troops at the time were armed with a .38 caliber M1892 revolver, which proved to be ineffective in jungle warfare and lacked sufficient stopping power. In some cases, the US Army reverted to using the M1873 single-action army revolver, also known as the Peacemaker, in order to use a more effective .45 caliber bullet. Because of the lessons learned during this conflict, the US military began the search for a replacement standard issue service pistol that was to be .45 caliber and preferably self-loading or semi-automatic. Enter John Moses Browning. Rarely in history is one single man credited for his numerous technological advancements and wildly successful inventions as he. If there was any one person that could design exactly what the military needed, it was him. During his life, he designed or helped to design a dizzying array of small arms and machine guns, including the Browning High Power Auto 5, which was the first semi-automatic shotgun, the water-cooled M1917, and the M2 heavy machine gun, which is still in use today. Browning set to work on developing the new .45 caliber handgun, and when trials began, competition was fierce, with several other big names in small arms design being present, such as Bergmann, Deutsches Waffen, DWM, Webley, and others. Several other designs were knocked out of the race early on, and in the end, Browning's pistol passed all tests, including a grueling 2-day, 6,000 round torture test in which the pistol was simply dunked into a bucket of water when it overheated. By the end of the trials, Browning's pistol reported 0 malfunctions, and on March 29, 1911, the Colt pistol, which was designed by Browning, was formally adopted, given the designation the M1911. The M1911's design was simple and rugged, and operated on the short recoil concept. When the pistol was ready to fire, the barrel and slide are locked together via recesses, until, after firing, the slide and barrel move rearwards together for a short distance before the barrel is cammed downwards via linkage on the bottom of the barrel. Once the barrel is unlocked from the slide continues moving rearward and the spent casing is ejected and a fresh round is stripped from the magazine while the hammer is recocked simultaneously. The M1911 fires in single action only, meaning that pulling the trigger performs one action, releasing the hammer. Because of this, M1911 pistols have light and short trigger pulls, which lends itself to accuracy. But care must be taken to always engage the safety when carrying a loaded pistol, as very little force is required to pull the trigger, and one could run the risk of an accidental discharge if the safety is not engaged. Following the format of previous videos in this series, this is about the time where we begin to chronicle the service history of the M1911. But unlike other firearms we've covered thus far, the service history of the M1911 is so long and storied that I would need hours just to scratch the surface. So please forgive me, as to say that what follows is an abridged history is a gross understatement. The M1911 immediately saw use in some small skirmishes immediately after adoption, but it was first tested in large-scale combat when the United States entered the Great War, or World War I. Immediately, the M1911 proved itself in battle, and when in the hands of a certain Sergeant Alvin C. York, he was able to kill 6 Germans with his M1911 pistol, who were charging his position with bayonets fixed during the Meuse-Argonne offensive. He was awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor as a result of his actions. Between the First and Second World War, a series of small changes to the M1911 adapted the pistol to be easier to use, especially for those with smaller hands. The trigger was shortened, mainspring housing arched, beaver tail grip safety extended to prevent hammer bite, and a few other minor changes. These changes redesignated the pistol as the M1911A1, and the pistol would not be modified again for the better part of a century. During World War II, the M1911A1 saw widespread use with the American and Allied forces with over 1.9 million units procured. Demand was so high for arms and ammunition during the war that any factory capable of machining was called upon to join the war effort. Some M1911 pistols were even made by unexpected manufacturers, including the Singer Sewing Machine Company. After World War II, the M1911 continued its service with the US military and was very effective for the so-called tunnel rats during Vietnam. But it also became wildly popular with civilians and competition shooters. The M1911 was eventually officially replaced by the Beretta M9 in 1985, but it continued to be used by various military and special operations units long after the arrival of the Beretta. As more and more manufacturers started to produce and improve upon the classic M1911 design, additional features became increasingly popular to modernize the aging handgun. Tactical accessory rails, threaded barrels, combat and adjustable competition sights, as well as a myriad of extended magazines, custom-fit barrel bushings, grips, and other enhancements hit the market. Finally, in 2014, the Special Operations Division of the United States Marines, or MARSOC, placed an order for 12,000 highly modernized versions of the M1911, designated the M45A1. This new pistol features a tactical accessory rail, tritium night sights, a dual recoil spring to reduce felt recoil, and a flat dark earth Cerakote finish, among other upgrades. Fans of the 1911 pistol rejoiced, as this now over 100-year-old pistol was finally coming back to official service. Since the adoption of the M45A1, it has been mostly replaced by the Glock 19 for logistical reasons, but some units still have a choice of selecting the M45A1 to this day. In Escape from Tarkov, it isn't a stretch of the imagination that the M1911 would be found in the hands of our PMCs. USEC operators would plausibly choose to bring along their hard-hitting .45 caliber pistol to Russia, and I suppose it may be even possible that a few World War II Lend-Lease A1 variants might be laying around in a couple old supply warehouses. As always, nearly every single detail on both the M1911A1 in-game as well as the M45A1 is modeled and textured beautifully. After analyzing both of these pistols with a scrutinizing eye, I can't find a single flaw or any detail about either pistol that is misrepresented from a real-life example. When examining Tarkov guns for this series, I like to find examples of where the developers have exhibited a keen attention to detail. And straight away I found such an example on the M1911A1 model. When reassembling a 1911 pistol, the slide catch is one of the last pieces to be reassembled, and it must be slotted upwards and interfaced with a small spring-loaded detent. Sometimes you can press it straight in, but in many pistols, it's far easier to push the catch upwards and then slide it up into the detent. If this is done carelessly, you'll get what's sometimes called the idiot scratch on the frame. The pistol in-game has this scratch, and it gives the appearance of an old gun which has been taken apart and put back together many times. An outstanding detail. The M45A1 looks outstanding and nearly identical to the ones that I've held in my own hands. My one critique is that out of the two most common finishes for the M45A1, the one in-game features a more burnt bronze coloration, rather than the light tan Cerakote or Deco Bond finish. While most PMCs aren't typically modifying pistols very much, if you'd like to outfit your 1911 or M45, you can make a few handy upgrades. The first and most obvious is to use the 11-round Metgar magazine, as the standard 7-round capacity can be a little lacking. Other than enhancing the appearance of your pistol, upgrades to the hammer and trigger aren't really needed, as they don't add a significant amount of ergonomics. If using the M45, a flashlight and laser combination like the X400 would enhance your lethality in particularly dark areas, such as trying to complete stir-up on Factory, or carrying the M45 as a secondary while sniping on a map like Reserve. You can attach an Omega 45 suppressor to reduce your sound signature and reduce recoil, but since there are no suppressor height sights yet for either pistol, the suppressor will obscure your vision while aiming slightly, and I find that it's typically not worth the rubles. Using the M1911 is about as straightforward as it gets. Just like all pistols in Tarkov, aim for the head. If you'd like to give yourself the chance to penetrate low to mid-tier armor, you can also equip your M1911 with 45 AP ammunition, which will reliably penetrate level 1 through 4 armor, but keep in mind that it will struggle with tier 5 and above. Although one would assume that the M1911 would have faded into obscurity and become nothing more than a curious item destined for the reliquaries of collectors long ago, this now 110-year-old pistol continues to serve not only as a military sidearm, but also one preferred and carried by countless law enforcement, sport and competition shooters, and civilians for personal protection. Perhaps a new pistol design will come along at some point that will force the 1911 into a well-earned retirement, but I can honestly tell you that I believe that this design, in one form or another, will still be relied on and trusted for the next century by more than just a few. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Gun Factor. This is our first handgun episode, and I hope that I gave you all enough of the design and history as I could without making the video unreasonably long. The 1911 certainly has a legendary history, but it is also a source of much debate within the gun community. Some consider it to be a boomer gun, which is too heavy and old to be considered for modern use, while others still champion the design now, 100 years later. But there's no denying its history and accolades over the last century. We still have plenty of guns to cover, so if you have a suggestion for the next episode, type it in the comments below. We have a bunch of new content planned and in the works, and they'll be out soon. But until then, I'm Jeff with EUL Gaming. Good luck out there.